it's an awful read, it's an awful report for the Met Police. How would you like to respond to that?
Well, I would pay tribute to Dame Louise Casey for this report. She spent a year and left no stone unturned. And what she's found is that the police is not capable of policing itself, that we have let down women, that neighbourhood policing has been disbanded, essentially, and that the institutional racism, misogyny and homophobia is still there. So this is a wake-up call for us all. She has suggested a 2-year period for the Met to consider and to change fundamentally the way that they act and lead, and at that point, if the Met hasn't made the changes that it needs to, then we need to look at more fundamental change to the Met. What Labour has said is there is a role there for the Met, of course, but there is also a role for government. We need national standards that are mandatory on vetting and misconduct. If an officer is being investigated for domestic abuse, for example, they should automatically be suspended. There is a role for government to step in there, and we must bring back neighbourhood policing, because that is what gives us policing by consent. It is the trust that you have in your local officers that builds that trust, and we must get to grips with the awful situation when it comes to violence against women and girls that Louise Casey outlined. Fridges defrosting with vital evidence in it so that women cannot get justice from when they've been raped. Lack of specialist officers saying they can't get any case to court because they are so overwhelmed with the number of cases they are dealing with. I think fundamentally what Louise Casey is saying is that policing attracts the best of humanity, but it will also attract predators, just like we know could happen in education or in medicine, and we have to put in place those structures to make sure any predator is not in the police force in the first place, but is removed as quickly as possible if they are. All of that will take time, but we mustn't let this report just sit on a shelf. This has to be a wake-up moment for us all.
Right, and do you think that Mark Rowley, the Commissioner, is the correct man to be doing that? Do you still have faith in him? I mean, we've heard from the government this morning saying that he largely agrees with the substance of this report, but he's refusing, isn't he, to accept the language of institutional misogyny, racism and homophobia. But actually, it's important, the language that the Baroness has chosen, and if he's refusing to ignore the chosen words, is he actually part of this culture of denial that the Baroness has exposed in this?
Well, she has looked at this for a year. She has looked at all the statistics. If you're a black officer, you're 81% more likely to be to be disciplined. If you're a woman, you are 10% of women working in the Met have reported sexual harassment. But when it comes to misconduct, it's sexual harassment claims that are the least likely to lead to an outcome. So the facts are there for all to see. Whatever you call it, there is institutional racism, misogyny in the police force. We have let down women, we are letting down Londoners, and we are letting down the good police officers who are trying to do their job but are really stymied by lack of resources. So there is a huge job of work to be done here that starts with accepting the findings of the report and that ends with... Yes, forgive me, the mic is very quiet, so I'm struggling to hear you. I do have faith in the Commissioner, as Louise Casey does too. He has been brought in relatively recently, and he has to be given time to make the changes that we need to see. He needs support from government. They need to intervene. They have stepped back from policing over the last 13 years, pushed the blame, pushed the responsibility onto local police forces not doing what they should. The report says that austerity has disfigured the Met. They use that language, which is very stark. We need to get our police back in our neighbourhoods. We need to be supporting women when they come forward as victims of violence, and we need to root out any predators who are working in our police force. We have to have a situation where girls can be confident to go up to police officers. And hello.
Sarah. Hello.
Yes.
I just wanted to say we're talking about faith. Hello. We're talking about faith in the Metropolitan Police there. I don't know about you, but I see this report and I
yes.
say, this just can't apply to the Met Police. If it's applying to the Met Police, it's applying to Lancashire Police, Yorkshire Police, whatever is in Scotland Police, Northern Ireland, the Police Service of Northern Ireland, whatever. It's bound to be there. You also are the Shadow Minister for the Fire Service, and I would say that's an organisation that probably needs looked at as well. Would you advocate, or would you be looking that this sort of report be applied to different organisations and different police forces around the country now? Just briefly.
Yes, absolutely, and forgive me for not being able to hear you when you're trying to ask me questions. Absolutely, this is a national problem, and Louise Casey makes that point in her report. Obviously, she's looked at the Met, that's where the lens is shining today, but we need national standards. There is a postcode lottery at the moment on how vetting is done, on how misconduct is done, on how training is done. That cannot be right. We have to have good standards when it comes to the police that we recruit, the way we train them, the way we support them to do their job, and there's a lot in this report about the mental health support that we need to give our officers who are dealing with incredibly difficult situations. This is a national problem. That's why the government needs to take a role.